Hi, good morning. Before I introduce the keynote, Yasmin asked me to say a few words about why I have been involved with ICON, which made me think. So, of course, I believe in the mission and I care about the mission, but there are many other missions that I care about that I don't spend the time and that I spend on ICON. So when I thought about it, three words really came to mind. And the three words are, because it works. And by that I mean the number and quality of relationships that either started or were reinforced and strengthened through ICON, I find astounding. Yasmin alluded to one of them that ended up in an acquisition. Many others ended up in customer relationships, partners, hires, advice, mentorship, everything that really makes the ecosystem what it is. I've benefited. I wasn't planning on benefiting from it personally. It turns out that I have been, and I'm also very familiar with others who have. So this is really why I'm putting the time and I care about, because it works. With that, is Aaron here? Yeah. Okay, good. So let me introduce first Oudi Antebi, the co-founder and CEO of Redkix, which has just been acquired by Facebook. And Oudi is going to interview Aaron Levie, who, as many of you know, dropped out of college to start one of the very first cloud companies, Box, took it to, made it all the way through to a public company, and beyond being a very successful entrepreneur, still very young, he's also probably the funny, if not one of, either one of the, or maybe even the funniest, maybe witty and outspoken observer and commentator on our industry. I personally like to follow his tweets, so I'm sure it's going to be a treat. Oudi and Aaron, please come on stage.
For a second, I wasn't sure you were going to show up, so.
No, it's very efficient. You guys, when I was growing up, we didn't have valets at the JCC. That was, This is a great innovation that we've brought to JCCs. We just had to park ourselves, and now it's completely changed.
No, we have to compete with the best startups out there.
Yeah, this is way. You definitely know VCs are around your local JCC when there's a valet. So that's
excellent.
It's nice to be in Palo Alto.
So I thought I would start with a story. I don't know if you remember it, Aaron, but how I got to know him. So in 2010, I had a startup called Office Inc. You remember that?
I do.
And we were partnering
I think
with
you
Google.
guys synced Office files.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
That's before files sync and share.
Right.
Or while you were working on it. And one day I get a call from Jeremy, and he says, I spoke with my boss, Aaron, and we would like you to explore partnering with us. And I say, who are you? And I said, Box. How big are you? We're like 30 people. And I said, we don't have time.
Thank you.
And in the words of the great Julia Roberts, big, huge mistake.
I think it turned out fine for you. So, and
it turned out fine. Since then, everywhere I go, whether it's Jive, Facebook, I keep chasing this guy.
You just like files way too much, man. Maybe it's time to change like industries or something.
I was thinking about that.
Okay.
So now that I joined Facebook, maybe I'll hop to
now you can do the
Instagram
fun
or
stuff.
something.
You don't have to spend as much time with us enterprises.
Exactly. Yeah. I think I've had enough of that. Anyways, so why don't you tell us a bit about Box? I think you started with an intent to be consumer.
Yeah, so we started the company in 2000. We got the idea in 2004 and launched it in 2005. And we didn't necessarily think about the business as either consumer or business. We just thought about it as let's build software for people. That that was the only context we had. So I was a sophomore in college doing an internship in LA at Paramount Pictures, and back then, if you're doing file sharing in the movie industry, what that means is you're driving around in a golf cart handing people papers, and so that was basically my job. So, rolling around in a golf cart, moving kind of files around for people. I got really good at fax machines my sophomore year, so a lot of faxing of data, and they were using this. The digital for them at the time was this product called Lotus Notes. So, I mean,
It was state of the art.
it was state of the art at the time.
State of the art.
Well, it was state of the art 10 years prior, but they still had it. So, they were using Lotus, and I have huge respect for Lotus and the team that built it. It was obviously a breakthrough innovation at the time, but you know, again, kind of 10 years later, it was sort of very difficult to use. And so between my internship and then in college, it was unnecessarily hard to share files. We basically said there has to be a better way to do this. It was right like 6 months prior, around there, Firefox had just come out, and so for the first time ever, you could actually have like real interactive applications in your browser. So we basically said, okay, the cost of storage is coming down pretty dramatically. Browsers are now much more powerful, and you can build interactive applications. You could sort of start to see a glint of this mobile revolution that was likely to be happening, starting with obviously BlackBerries. And so we said, okay, what if you could just put your files in one place securely, access them from anywhere, share them with anyone? And that was, in our original business plan, we had everything from personal use cases called out. We had student and educational use cases. We had business use cases. So we didn't really have any particular focus on a market. We just said, let's build software for people that are having this problem. And within about a year and a half of launching the company, and lots of sort of twists and turns, our three other co-founders dropped out of college, and we all lived together in Berkeley, and we were changing the business model literally every single day. We actually had this. There was like, apparently, this is probably our fault, but apparently there was like no server monitoring software in 2005. So what we would have is somebody had to be awake at all times during the day. So we had basically 24-hour rolling shifts, and you would basically wake up to one of the founders sending an email saying, like, holy fuck, the website blew up last night, and then that's why they would have stayed awake for an extra 5 hours. But there was this problem where basically, you could realistically go to sleep and wake up, and our business model would have changed. And it was basically like whatever 2 or 3 people were still awake, we would change the business model each day. And so we're constantly like, okay, we're going to go really deep in consumer. We're going to go really deep into business. And eventually, we landed on through the help of actually some early VCs, and one of our co-founders was really kind of focused on and much more pragmatic. We basically said, okay, in the consumer market, we think that this is going to be insanely competitive, very commoditized. The cost of storage is going to zero, so you're not really going to be able to get much of a margin. In the enterprise market, we looked at the market and said, okay, it's about $30 to $40 billion of spend in IT every year that goes into document management, content management, collaboration software. And we were unknowingly at the time building this disruptive model for going after that market. If you sort of follow Clayton Christensen or Innovator's Dilemma, sort of this classic low-end disruption to traditional content management enterprise software. And so we basically just continued to exploit that and pivoted the company into the enterprise in about 2006, 2007, and then and since then have.
And you raised money from Shark Tank, no?
We raised, well, we got, so right before pivoting, we tried to raise some money, and my co-founder and I, anybody from Seattle in here?
Oh, wow. I live in Seattle.
Yeah, so Seattle in 2004, 2005 had just been finally kind of coming off the bubble, and the dot-com bubble. A lot of the VCs had shut down, and so not a lot of people were investing at the time, as you'll recall. And it was even worse if you were a 20 and 19-year-old kind of showing up to VCs trying to pitch them. So we got rejected from everybody in Seattle, except for a couple sort of random local real estate investors. And part of the reason was my co-founder has this uncanny ability to look 10 years younger than he actually is. So at 19, he looked like he was 11. And so it was just really awkward. Like, you're going into a VC. They think you're going to take the money to Disneyland. Like, it's not. They're like, who's your little brother? And why is he the CFO? I don't understand. Very confusing proposition for any VC. at the time. And so basically everybody in Seattle rejected us. And so conveniently and actually ironically, but realistically, the only thing that could happen, the only investor that would say yes, the only real kind of significant investor that said yes was Mark Cuban. And it was because he had never met us. It was done over email completely. So I think if you'd seen a picture of Dylan, it wouldn't have happened. But basically, he ended up writing us a check for about $300,000, investing in the company. That led to us dropping out of college and kind of having enough confidence to go do that. And then a year later, he asked for his money back. I think maybe because he met Dylan, I don't know. But we sort of didn't get we couldn't align on business models, and so he asked for his money back. And
I hope you didn't give him his money back.
Oh, we did.
Oh,
yeah, totally. It was actually great for us because it retired his shares so he didn't ask for any return.
No?
It was very commendable. He asked for no return. At the time, it was stressful as shit, but looking back, it was really great for our cap table. He basically retired the shares. DFJ actually helped us basically buy him out. So it was ended up being a great transaction for all parties, I think, except him. But I think he's doing okay, so I don't think he's
he's regretting it every day. He's like, yeah, could have been rich.
If only that box deal.
Yeah, exactly. If only box. So you were saying 2007, you decided to go the enterprise. I'm sure it was your dream. When you were a kid, I'm going to be an enterprise software. Inspiration, SharePoint. When I grow up, I want to be SharePoint. You know.
Yep.
Like those
you knew my childhood well.
Every kid in Seattle grows up with that dream.
Yep.
Right?
Well, it's sort of it is sort of like it's like Star Warsian in some way because you do grow up. You grow up in so I grew up in a lot of the neighborhoods where a lot of Microsoft employees worked, and so you always wanted to either be like them or revenge them, or, whatever. But we ended up pivoting into the enterprise. Not the sort of first thing that we wanted to do, and I was actually probably the most reluctant of all the founders. But one of our founders, Jeff, was again very pragmatic, and he just sort of saw that the survival of the business was at stake if we didn't actually focus on a market. And I was sort of thinking we could hedge a little bit and kind of be in both markets. And he was very clear that we had to bet on one space. And to his credit, that ended up being the thing that saved the business. But yeah, it was definitely an interesting experience being 22, and then 21, our founding team, and basically saying, okay, like screw the consumer market, we're going to go fully in the enterprise. And the starting to hire a very different crop of people early on. But one thing we did, one thing we were very clear on is, we as soon as we decided to pivot the company, we knew that we had to keep our sort of end user or consumer ethos of the company at the core of everything we did, and we felt like this was going to be the disruptive model that we could bring to the enterprise. So given that a Microsoft or an EMC or an Oracle is going to always have a larger distribution channel than us, they're going to always have more sales reps, they're always going to have more channel partners, they're already inside of the businesses of basically every enterprise on the planet. What is our kind of unique vector of attack? And it was really through end users. And so we said, okay, maybe there's this thing where end users could bring our software into the workplace. It could go viral, and then you would go and sell to the IT department, a better, more secure, more advanced solution. And largely, at least at like a 10,000-foot view, that ended up being the business model for a really, really long time. Now we actually sell a little bit more tops down, but we were able to take the sort of momentum of end users being very frustrated with their enterprise technology and take full advantage of that by them sort of being the force of distribution. So kind of a unique distribution model in the enterprise, but it worked and got tens of millions of users to bring Box into organizations. And then we would go into a company and they would say, the CIO would say, we don't need your software, SharePoint's fine. And then we would say, well, here are the 5,000 people that are actually, using Box, which sort of suggests that maybe SharePoint isn't working in your environment. And then that would end up kind of kicking off a more strategic conversation. So that focus on the end user and the consumer ethos on the product side was incredibly important. And then that sort of is rolled into our culture, more or less, which is, I think if you look at the kind of culture that we've tried to build, it looks a lot more like a consumer internet company that happens to sell to enterprises, as opposed to an enterprise software company that just maybe has some designers and product managers that are consumer oriented.
It's a fascinating story. I was thinking about this when I was at your office with Tony, CEO of Jive, it was before you went public, and you told us that you were planning to go public, and he told you...
That sounds like I broke some confidential information. Okay, fine.
No,
Okay.
it was a general
Oh, it's generally known.
intent
Okay, cool.
with a date, a number, and
Okay.
and the whole, and you
All right. So I
shared
didn't
all,
break any SEC violations
you
on that
shared
one.
all the documents with us, but for now, let's pretend that
Okay,
it was
fine.
very vague. And he said, "Do you think it's going to be fun?" He said, "You're going to hate it." So I'm curious because very Tony Zingali like to be
Yeah.
direct.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, because on one hand, this is the dream come true for a startup, right? Hey, we're going to go public. I know most of us lie when we say that, because
Right.
what we want to do is actually sell the company and retire. But for the few that actually mean that, this is dream come true. So pre-post, is this dream come true? Are you like looking forward to earnings and like?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. So it was not a dream come true when we started the company, in that we never thought about I think maybe by virtue of us, not really being in the Silicon Valley scene, and all of our other startup ideas in high school that we had failed miserably. There's websites that didn't work. So we never really even thought about, like, the word. If you had said the word exit to me when we were starting Box, I wouldn't have known what you meant. Like, I don't know what that means. That terminology didn't exist. We weren't thinking about you build something to sell it. We thought you build software and then actually you don't really know what happens next. Like you build a website and
pray.
then what's that?
You pray.
You build a website, you pray, and then based on our experience, you shut it down. Like that's the cycle of building a startup. Like I had done that about a dozen times. Like that, I had perfected the art of launching something and turning it off. So I assumed that was the model, and I went through the motions that you would go through. You do the business plan, you do all that kind of stuff, but we never really thought that many steps ahead. Probably until we probably only started thinking more steps ahead when folks like Brett, gave us billion-dollar valuations. They were like, "Oh shit! Like this is a real business. Like we got to take this more seriously." So, I'm sure you thought we were taking it more seriously before then. Sorry. But I think we basically just had this view of, okay, there's a couple billion people in the world that are going to need to share files and collaborate. Like that's a pretty large market. Let's try and build software that is better than the competition and see if we can get to all those people. We wanted, don't get me wrong, we wanted world domination, but we didn't think through exactly what is the valuation at the end of that world domination? How does that all work? So being public was not the dream, but maintaining and building an independent company and sustainably growing over a long period of time has been the dream really since we started. So I think the consequence of doing that is you want liquidity for shareholders. You want to be able to let employees trade their stock, which means that you have to be a public company for the most part. Although obviously SoftBank is changing that a bit. But let's assume you have to be a public company. So then it just becomes another era of the business and the way that you have to run the company. And I think that. I think there's the SaaS model, the software subscription as a service model, makes being public a lot easier than I think it was, prior to SaaS. I mean, perpetual licensed software, consumer internet where it's all ad-based, and that would stress me out completely. But having most of your business as a subscription model, where you kind of have longer-term predictability of where the revenue is coming from, how it's trending. At least makes it easier to sleep at night, and then I don't mind the transparency and the quarterly rhythm, because I think it's sort of, it used to be me having to yell at the company about how much we have to move and like we have to move faster. Now it's actually just like all of Wall Street yelling at the company, so it sort of lets my management kind of get done for me, because everybody kind of knows like, hey, we're going to show up at the end of the quarter with our numbers, and they're either going to be good or bad, and so why don't we actually try and make them really good. And so that ends up being a kind of freebie that you get for being public. And then I think the scrutiny and the operational rigor that it forces you to have has actually been a real positive. I wouldn't expect anybody to know this, but we were known for burning lots of capital as a private company. And
there were talks about parking lots, cash, burning, smoke.
No, that was all real.
Environmental.
Yeah, totally. There were environmental concerns around our office based on how much cash was burning. Yeah, this is like a real EPA issue. But it was all going to good places, I promise, Brett. So we were Ben Horowitz had this blog post I think called the Fat Startup or something like that, and it was all about this idea of like there are these windows of opportunity in markets that open up, and you have to exploit those opportunities to build the leading company in that moment. And we took that to heart deeply. And when you're in that mode where you might be spending $10, $20, $30 million a quarter in burn, so losing that much, you are just literally about building scale as rapidly as possible. How do we hire as many salespeople? How do we hire as many engineers? How do we make sure we're in front of as many customers as possible? And you lose some of the operational rigor that would be really important if you wanted to build a highly profitable operation, cash flow positive business. But there's a time and a place for it, and we were at that time and place. And then as a public company, you want to move more toward a model where we make really severe trade-offs in all of our investment decisions. We obviously run the business to cash flow positive, and I think that's been a positive that has come with being public. So there's some stressful things. You see the Elon Musk stuff of like you have short sellers tweeting at you, saying mean things. As I was driving here, somebody said I need to quit my job. So that stuff happens. But you just it's not that big of a deal.
Don't quit. I don't think a tweet is worth it.
No.
So
I've tweeted at lots of people to quit their jobs. So mostly senators, so I can't. I think it's just bad karma that I have.
Yeah, it was so that. Yeah. Okay. So Twitter is not the tool to get people fired.
No.
Okay. We've established that. So you're a public company. However, when you come to a box office, it still feels very startup-y like. So.
Oh, thank you.
How do you maintain that? How do you keep a growing company to feel more like a startup?
Yeah, well, I mean, not all companies can be as profitable as Facebook. So some of it is
just since we joined.
Yeah.
Okay. It's been 8 weeks.
Yeah. I'll let you talk about whatever you want there. But
I'm not allowed to speak about.
I didn't think so. So one is out of just sheer we still are literally a startup in the financial sense. Like we are running at break even. We're trying to grow as fast as possible. We have a massive market to take on. We cannot rest on we don't even have laurels. So we can't rest on anything. Like we are fighting. If I could find some laurels, I would. We are just literally cranking on execution because it's a very competitive market. We have no shortage of companies that would love to be able to be the backbone for how companies manage their data and their content. And we that's a big market that we obviously want to compete in. So you can't slow down. And then I also think that I think there's a lot of lessons that you learn from being a really small startup, like we've both been through. And you actually, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how do you recreate that type of dynamic at scale. So how do you create the dynamic of your team is 5 or 10 people big, you don't feel like anybody else is going to help your cause because it's just literally, that's the size of your company, you're 5 or 10 people. So you have complete culture around ownership, you have a complete culture around just execution and getting shit done. And so then the question is, how do you replicate that when you have 2,000 people, when you are cash flow positive? So it's not like you're going to go out of business literally tomorrow in the same way that when you're a startup. And so what we try and do is sort of cascade that ownership down to the sort of smallest kind of unit in the company that's doing things, which is a team. And we've tried to create a culture where it's about lots of small teams, you kind of working in concert, but with their own kind of local mission. And we've tried to design our building and environment around that. We've tried to design our business model around that. We have lots of sort of product teams and pods that go out and execute. And we've tried to design, again, the kind of overall culture to
do you feel as connected to the company as you were before? Do you feel like you know what's going on? Do you have like the same sense of family or closeness?
I feel like I do. I'm positive most people feel like I don't. And hopefully the truth is somewhere in between. If you read Only the Paranoid Survive or High Output Management, Andy Grove has a lot of lessons on management and lessons, and I kind of walk the halls each day that I'm not on the road with customers, and I'm getting like only small sort of surface level views into what's going on, because the conversation might be a 30-second conversation. How's that project? Where are we at with that new product? How's that customer? But then I try my best to sort of synthesize all of those, stitch those pieces together, and get a little bit of a sense for the business, at least at HQ or the big offices that I'll visit. But it's tough. Like you're not on. I mean, like the biggest thing there was actually literally last night there was this meeting. There was this meeting of 3 product managers in a room, and it was going till like 8 or 9 p.m. And I was really stressed. I was not stressed, but I was like, that's the exact kind of meeting I want to be in. Like I want to be. They were whiteboarding, and as soon as they were with their markers, I was like, God, I want to have a marker, and I want to be in that room. And so I had to ask the VP who's running the team a different question. So I asked for his time for like 1 minute. And I said, hey, this different thing that we had to address. And then I said, hey, any chance you want me in that room or not in that room? And he said, no, we got this. I was like, cool, okay, I'll let you do your thing. And now,
You went to your office and started crying?
I went to my desk and started crying.
Yeah.
And now, 7 years ago, I wouldn't have even asked that question. I would have just gone in the room, gotten a marker, written over everybody else's work, and be like, this is what we're doing. So I'm trying to mature as a manager, let that team do their thing, and but it was very hard. It was very, very hard to.
So what do you spend most of your time on? Is it product mostly, running the business, customers, closing deals? Like how do you? Because you're a founder, CEO, product guy. How does what's most of your time?
I think I'll give you the categories, and if you looked at my calendar, I don't know that you'd be able to really figure out the actual math, but product is sort of the core of everything we do. So try and spend all discretionary time on product. So design meetings, product review meetings, strategy meetings, really just understanding what we're building, how we're building it, et cetera. Second is probably customers. So in the nature of enterprise software, obviously many of us are in this industry. You're on the road a lot. I just got back from a 10-day road trip in a whole bunch of cities, and you're just literally meeting customers 5 or 10 times a day. So spend a lot of time with customers. A lot of time on culture that sort of doesn't show up as like one thing that is like the culture meeting, but like new hire onboarding. Trying to think about our talent, and people strategies, all that kind of type of stuff. And then one thing that I've tried to spend a little bit more time in are like the core processes of the company. So the things that over time will either be atrophying because they're not working anymore, the things that are not scaling well, the things that never existed because we didn't have those functions that had to work together previously. So try and spend a little bit of my time looking across the business and saying, where is there inefficiency? Where is there unnecessary bureaucracy? How do we break that? How do we make sure people can execute more effectively? And then either trying to create a process, not that I designed, but like instigate the creation of a process, or remove or change something that can make us more efficient. So those are kind of the big ticket areas.
Got it. Okay, so I have many more questions about Box, but I'm gonna
Thank you.
switch things here a little bit.
We're not going to do those. Okay, got it.
Because
Okay.
we have many startup people here. By the way, I got really excited yesterday. I read on his Twitter bio that he likes ABBA. I'm a Metallica fan. I said, so I'm getting all excited. I'm looking for a T-shirt to buy him.
ABBA and Metallica are not really in the same genre.
Exactly,
Okay,
but
got it.
that I do know.
I'm
that
a
I do
Japan
know.
fan, so yeah. Okay.
That I do know. So I thought we would do like a joke about this, and then we met yesterday. I'm like, are you really an ABBA fan? He's like, so he ruined my joke. The whole opening of this event was supposed to be completely different.
I'm sorry to change the entire theme of your day today, but no, I like ABBA as much as anybody else in this room, but I don't have a particularly significant ABBA interest.
Okay. Well, it's still funny. I'll change my Metallica to ABBA in my Twitter. Because there are many startup people here and founders, I thought maybe you could tell us more or help us from your experience, share your wisdom. I would say one of the big things is small startups want to work with big companies.
Yeah.
Right. And it's sometimes challenging. So I don't know if you have. Do you see? I'll ask the question differently. Do you see Box becoming a customer of a small startup?
Yeah.
As a product?
Yeah.
Do you have examples of startups or products that you guys use that are from truly small companies?
Yeah, tons. I can give you plenty of examples. I mean, the great thing about the cloud right now is that companies are now solving an entire new set of technology problems that nobody ever would have paid attention to previously, or you would have even thought we could be solving with technology. You know, it was interesting. I just recently visited a company, and there was a paper-based sign-in form where you wrote your name, the time that you came in, and like that was actually shocking to me because I haven't done a paper-based sign-in maybe for the past 3 or 4 years because there's a company called Envoy that has taken over all possible companies that need any form of sign-in, and we were a very, very early customer of theirs, maybe first 30, and it was like just super obvious. It was like, why the hell would you do paper-based sign-in in you know, at the time, maybe 2014 or whatever, like just you swipe on an iPad with your finger and you're good. So we brought them in, and now, you know, they're obviously, I think, largely, I mean, or that idea is largely standardized across the industry. So we'll do that, you know, quite frequently when we see a new area that is just a way better, more efficient way than we were solving something previously. I would say that given the nature of our business model, there are some spaces where we just have way more rigor than we would have had, or way more scrutiny than we would have had maybe 10 years ago. And you know, our customer base is Pfizer and Eli Lilly and Morgan Stanley and the Department of Justice and NASA. And so you know, there's a lot of data that we work with that is really, really important. And so you know, the 6-person startup that says, hey, we want to scan all of your data and we're going to, you know, come up with a new encryption algorithm. And then it's you know, going to look for, you know, detection of different things. It's like, great idea on paper. We just don't want to be your first customer. Like just that's going to be, you know, why don't you just go take that to Goldman Sachs first, call us in a couple years, and then we'll look into it. So there are some things where I have become the IT person that I hated selling into. And it's because, unfortunately, no fault of anybody in this room, you know, startups get hacked. They go out of business. They lose data. Like, and so like we're just not going to put our business or our customers' business on the line to help incubate some new idea that is in a mission critical area of our product. And God bless the customers that are willing to make those kind of bets on new ideas. We wouldn't be here if there weren't large enterprises that for some reason saw an inkling of something that they could bet on. And we all owe you know, any of our success or scaling to those types of innovative, you know, IT leaders, CIOs, or whatever. But in our environment, given the data that we touch, we like to be a little bit more of the mass market kind of buyer if the technology really deals with security, data protection, interacting with data flows, et cetera. You know, the challenge is there is no shortage of companies that would say, hey, we can scan all of your emails and predict, you know, something that you should do with your email. And, you know, you've been in the email space, and it's great, but like then it's like I knew us when we were a 10 or 15 person company, and you know, you are, let's say security is not always the number one thing that you do all day long. Like you're trying to build product, you're shipping features. And so I would rather be, again, customer 100 of those types of ideas than customer 3 or 5 or 10. But I'm rooting for you.
In other words, if you have something that they can buy, just afterwards, there's a...
Yeah, if that's your takeaway, absolutely.
Your credit card, yeah. Trying to help.
No, but we
you invest in startups, by the way? Does Box invest?
Box does not. I do personally.
Personally?
Very infrequently, but occasionally.
Enterprise or what?
I try and... you know, I get enough enterprise
this is like your escape,
my day
right?
job. It's more of my way of escaping enterprise is usually through investing in things that hopefully look nothing like what we're doing.
Yeah, okay, that I relate totally. So maybe in terms of advice, or let me ask it differently. Tell us about something that when you look back, do you regret or should have taken a different path?
You know, I think
you
that...
don't regret anything?
No, I mean, tons. I'm trying to actually like rank sort it right now. like there's too many.
We said only up to 50. We can't go more than 50.
Right, okay. All right, we'll keep it to 50 regrets. No, so I would say a lot of lessons learned, and I don't, you know, I'm much more oriented in the future, so most of anything that I regret is more just around what is a lesson learned that I won't make again, that I won't screw up again, and that we want to focus on the future. But I do think, you know, going back in time and thinking through, you know, small startups, I think, you know, a few random things. You know, we obviously learned that you never want to hedge your businesses, your business model. It's really important to be incredibly focused on at least one, just basically one big idea. And I wasted a good year and a half just trying to hedge the business model. Like, are we consumer? Are we enterprise? We'd probably be I don't know, 30% bigger if we had gotten that first year and a half, not wasted time, and just focused on the enterprise market. Because all the compounding kind of decisions and that would have happened much like another year.
Do
or
you think
two.
it was even possible to get to that decision faster, or it's just the nature of how these decisions are made in that time?
Well, it depends on how you want to define what a regret is. So yeah, using my framework, where I now have perfect information about what happened, I regret not doing it sooner. But is it possible to have done something different? Who fucking knows? But that's first thing. This is less of a regret and more of a thing that I've realized is 10 times more important than I had thought at the time. When we started the company, we had I think a pretty normal startup culture, not that many idiosyncrasies. Maybe the only idiosyncrasy that was more or less unique is, again, 4 founders. We all grew up together in middle school and high school. And so that created this sort of culture of like we could debate anything, we could yell at each other, we could call each other out on bullshit, but then we'd be right back at business working together, a minute or two later. And so that probably kind of created a culture of collaboration with healthy debate, where there was sort of trust embedded in that collaboration, because people knew that they would see the founders fight about things, but we would do it in a way where like they know that like Dylan's not going to walk out the door and never come back. Like that was just how we debate things. So that was probably one of the early idiosyncrasies. But so I had sort of thought that the culture would kind of maybe just emerge organically over time, and we would just build a startup, and that would be our culture. And a handful of early executives, I think, were more clear that you actually want to like institute, reinforce, and kind of get clear on your values, like the do's and don'ts of the business, the things that you're going to live by, the things that you're not going to tolerate. And I treated that as an academic exercise for quite some time. Like, hey, we have these values, we live by them. I would talk about them, but I didn't know exactly what they meant until you were really tested on those later on. Like, do you fire this person who's clearly not living by one of these values or not? And that was where the real learning of values kind of started showing up. And so I look back now, and we've changed things quite a bit in this area, and I would have probably done way more early on to say, actually, like, your values are literally the core operating system of your company. It's because your people and the decisions and how they're going to make those decisions. And so how do you make sure that they are instituted, reinforced in every process, in every system, in every hiring decision, every firing decision, all of that? And it took me a good 6-7 years to understand the real essence of that. And I would go back, if I could go back, it would be, the first thing I would do as a company is like, here are the rules of the business. Here are the principles that we're going to live by, and we're not going to deviate from this, under ideally any circumstance.
So speaking of the value.
Okay, cool. I mean, maybe one of our values is be evil, and you're just clapping at the wrong thing. So,
do they know something that we know? So on those values, did it change your style as a manager? I mean, over those years, does it affect you personally as a manager and how you?
Yeah, because I think that now I realize that I'm way more in sort of teaching mode than I realized. Like, I thought I could just be one participant amongst the system, but the reality is that it's my responsibility to make sure that we are driving and living by our 7 core values, but then also just like other values that aren't written down, which is like be a good person and build a healthy environment, et cetera. And so that sort of adaptation of moving from sort of I'm just one part of this system to actually like ultimately the buck does stop with me in terms of my ability to go drive these values down through the culture, call out people that are doing great things and reinforcing them, and then being a part of unfortunately again key decisions when somebody isn't living by those values, and what do we do about that? So just basically, how do you cultivate, how do you reinforce, and how do you drive these through the culture is a learning exercise. And I think that this is like there's a lot of things that you get when you've founded a company for the first time. Like, we get a certain naive optimism on I wasn't. I could never imagine starting Box again with the things that we know, because now I know how hard all the things have been over the past 13 years, and I would just be like, fuck all of those. Like, that's just way too hard. Like, why would you ever want to go through that? So there's a lot of things that being super naive and super kind of optimistic kind of bring you. There are some things that are bad, which is like I've never worked at a company other than, again, an internship, and so I didn't really realize all of the downstream consequences of all the decisions, all the people decisions, all the sort of how the system actually works at scale. And so that's why values, as an example, it kind of felt like the kind of thing all companies put on a poster, and you just do it because the HR department has to do an initiative on values. And so I literally kind of thought about it that way when we were 20 and 21, and now I'm like, oh shit, that's the core of everything that you're doing as a business. And the companies that treat those as platitudes are probably just the ones that are not living by those. And so then you build a certain cynicism toward it. But the key is just to go live by those.
Excellent. So I do want to give people a chance to ask questions, but maybe before, do we want to do that? Or is this by the rules of? Okay. Okay. And, people have questions, but before. Oh wow, I had more here, but let's go. I see there is energy. Do you know him?
Yeah. If you have ever been a really large shareholder, keep the questions very polite, please. Yeah. No, I said your cash incinerator.
Your cash, their incinerator.
Yeah, your cash, my incinerator.
Clearly, you did a great job of hyperscale.
Yeah.
What are the lessons learned from that, as well as you up-leveled at each managerial level, right? And you still retain the people that were there, but also add on top. So just what are the lessons learned from specifically the hypergrowth?
Yeah, well, on the people dimension, this one still is tough to this day. I mean, you have I have no algorithm. I mean, honestly, it's so person by person. You have some set of people that miraculously just continue to be able to take on more and more work, and then you sort of identify those people and you keep loading them up with more and more challenges, and they start to build out more and more teams under them, and we had a person who was 23 maybe when he joined Box, 23 or 24. He was our maybe fourth sales rep. Now he runs North American sales, and he has, 200, 300, 400 people under him. And he joined at 23, and he had been an individual contributor all prior to that. And it was a person that at every step of the way, sought out as much information, knowledge, learning, as possible, met every single person he could to get better at his job, and so we moved him around globally, and we kept on betting on him as we scaled, and that was and again, it's a great kind of case study in that person being able to scale and work out. And we've done that in engineering, we've done that in lots of parts of the company, and then there are other areas where either because of the speed at which you have to solve the problem, or the significance and the gravity of that domain, you don't want to do that. We brought in our chief accounting officer, who was the controller at PayPal under our CFO, because that's an area that we just don't this is not an area we have a value of take risks, fail fast, get shit done. That value does not apply to our accounting department. So they should not live by that value. They will get fired if they live by that value. So you want a controller and an organization in the controller space that is incredibly robust and has a lot of expertise. And same thing in our financial planning department. We had somebody come in who had built out a significant department at Salesforce and just kind of knew the next 10 years of our business model instantly that he was able to come with. And so we try and blend things where if there's a massive premium on being able to solve that problem instantaneously, or the gravity of the situation because the risks are so high, we generally probably will tilt a little bit more towards experience. And then in areas where we want to take a bet on somebody, where we have time to be able to see can they succeed in that area, I think we at least try and default toward is their internal talent that we can continue to grow. But I don't know if I'd love it to be 50-50. I don't know the number, but I think what you see is when you look around our leadership, our extended leadership team, so sort of senior directors, VPs, and above, you see some set of people that have been there for 7 years and grown through the business, and you see some set of people that are a couple of years in that came in with that experience, and I think that's created this healthy dynamic. I think one of the challenges with hyperscaling is this issue of you do bring in a lot of people who have sort of been there and done that. There's also no perfect algorithm for this, but some of the things that they've been there and done is like exactly what you want to go replicate. And then some of the things that they've learned and done before are exactly the things that you want them to throw away and forget about, because our model's different, the market's different. Just a 5-year difference in this industry, and you can have completely different changes in how you go do something, right? Like if you were to sell to developers, if you have a developer-oriented business model today, you better be a 100% online, developer-only, sort of ecosystem-driven type of product. 5 or 10 years ago, maybe you could have gotten away with having a sales team go after the CTO or those models. This is just the currents of how our business and our industry is changing. And so part of that problem of hyperscaling was bringing in people, having them to kind of tune their own understanding of the market, take the best of what they brought, and then modify some of it for our business model.
Yeah, let's take.
Mm. I'm positive that there's a lot of good things that breeds. So if you could be surrounded by a bunch of mentors, a bunch of people that have different perspectives, I think that is like I'm more familiar with like Y Combinator as an example, and there's a lot of companies that have come out of Y Combinator where there's always this story of like they came in with one idea, they got feedback from somebody in the YC batch, and then all of a sudden that built a completely different business that ended up being successful and taking off. So I think that incubators are have massive positive things. I think that also the community of being around a bunch of people that are just going through the exact same set of problems as you was really helpful. We had that. It just wasn't in the form of an incubator. We had that because our founding team was 4 people. So already you had a nucleus of enough people that we could kind of just like we were going through this experience together. And if anybody was out here in 05, 04, 06, there was just a really healthy startup scene of like people were building YouTube, people were building Facebook, and you'd go to a barbecue and share war stories with people that were going and building their company, and that company would become YouTube or whatever. And so that was we were already kind of getting that, I think, organically in the ecosystem. But I think that incubators can absolutely help on that. I think the only risk I might see, this is all hypothetical because we've never been through an incubator, is sometimes like too much feedback can be a negative, because it's like at some point just build a product, like you need to take ownership for pivoting and iterating or whatever, and I would say 90% of the feedback we got early on didn't end up being useful. And so if we had spent 10 times more time getting more feedback, I think we would have just been even more confused. Sometimes the answers aren't sometimes it's more like us as founders that are trying to fight obvious things, and you don't need more feedback on that. We just need to be at times a little bit more rational. Like there was just no way that we were going to build a consumer business, and so I just was fighting my founder on these sort of hypothetical hopeful scenarios, and he was just right, and so he just beat me down over time. So.
And the reality is you ask 10 different people, that you have 10 different opinions.
Yeah,
and the only person that really understands what's going on internally are the founders and the team. So
absolutely, and I find this super tough because we've been through it. I'll meet with startups and I'll give advice, but then I'll just do this caveat, which is also I have no idea about your business or the answer here. So good, it's really hard to give advice to other people who there's about 14,000 permutations of anybody's business model. And so it's, a lot of this is just you have to be out there testing, iterating, and then trying new ideas out in the market.
Your own values. Thanks. When you think, so again, I'll just repeat for people that didn't hear. I loved your notes on values and culture, and I loved how important you found it is. And so a lot of these values are, rather straightforward, like being a good person or executing and ownership. I was wondering if there's any counterintuitive value or element of culture that you've discovered that could be helpful for a early stage startup.
Well, so I would say that we have 7 core values, which are at the time we kind of wrote these things a little bit more irreverently. So we had a value on this be a good person thing, which some companies have a no asshole rule. We wanted a slightly more optimistic one, but we had a little bit of a joke in there, and it was make mom proud with an asterisk, and then unless she's evil. And so, for some reason, I think it was voted to remove the "unless she's evil" part. But one of our values is "make mom proud" today, and we mean that to be symbolic, like make anybody proud in your life that you hold up as sort of a very values-oriented person, and that's been our really easy litmus test of did that thing kind of qualify as making mom proud, like whether that's a people issue, whether that's a whatever was that, working with a customer, would somebody you care about be proud of this moment, and that's our easy kind of filter for that. So that's not counterintuitive at all, but that's our sort of version of from a culture standpoint, what we care about. I think in terms of counterintuitive, I think unfortunately there's so much startup lessons out there that almost nothing's counterintuitive at this point. So I think it's all, there's a lot of intuitive stuff now. I'm going to fail at your question on what is counterintuitive. But I'll just say the general principles that I would have are, and that I've either learned or stolen or read about over the years are, things like find market inflection points and ride those as hard as possible. This is something that came down from John Chambers, and I've lived by this to this day, which is like, in our business, in our industry, there's sort of things that are going to be massive tailwinds for a technology trend. There's things that are going to be completely neutral, and there's going to be things that are obviously now headwinds that you just want to avoid that market, and you want to find tailwinds, and like it's not worth building a startup if you're in a neutral market. You want tailwinds. So what are the mega trends in technology, in the underlying sort of social behavior of people or whatever, in business models that you can ride and exploit every dimension of those tailwinds as much as possible. Another one that we've tried to do, and there's a book called 7 Powers, and basically this author, he's a professor at Stanford and also kind of like hedge fund manager, and he basically kind of accumulated what he asserts are the only 7 competitive advantages you can have as a company. It kind of takes a little bit from Michael Porter, it takes a little bit from Clay Christensen, and it's basically these seven things that are like the core competitive advantages you can build as a company. And one is basically counter positioning, and this idea of do something in your business model that the incumbent literally can't do. And I think so many startups, we sort of convince ourselves that we're doing something disruptive, but really it's just a sustaining innovation for an existing incumbent. Like the moment they wake up to your existence, they'll just build that feature and then you're out of business. And so finding things that for economic reasons, for company DNA reasons, the incumbent literally cannot actually compete with. If you're a small startup, you really want to make sure that you have that at your back, because there's so many reasons why a company is not going to succeed in the startup world. Don't make your business model be a really easy one, or your core product be a really easy one for why you're not going to succeed from a competitive standpoint. And our version of that was we felt, and at times we've actually had to evolve. I don't think there's any way to do like counter positioning forever. You're always adapting this, but for us, it was really this end user distribution. We felt like we could bring we said we're going to make our software free for end users, and we felt like that was something that incumbents couldn't do because they had multi-billion-dollar cash cows in this space. So that was our sort of disruption. So you want to find disruptive either business models, economics, market tailwinds, and then it's, from there it's just execution. And can you constantly you kind of iterate and execute faster than the competition? Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes. Hi, Aaron. My name is Ofer. I moved here about 7 years ago from Israel.
Oh, cool.
My company, Interactive, got acquired about 2 years ago, and I'm a father of 1-month twin boys. So
oh, wow.
I may fall asleep while I'm asking the question. Yeah, thank you. So while we have a great day here, I'm having a really bad day at work. True story. Want to ask you, can you share, to help me, can you share like a holy shit day that you had back in the day, and also something more
Back in the day,
recent?
like fucking yesterday. What are you talking about?
Here you go. And how did you come out of it? That's the question. Like a big holy shit day back in the days, and now, even after we sell and get public, and how do we survive?
Yeah. Well, you know, so the so one is so I took the Andy Grove's "Only the Paranoid Survive." Unfortunately, many times like too seriously, too literally, and did build like a deep level of paranoia. And I've actually had to go to therapy, not because of Andy Grove. I don't blame him. But I have this thing called I don't know the medical terminology, but it was explained to me as catastrophizing. And so basically, I have this uncanny ability to imagine the worst case scenario and the complete catastrophe of a situation, and then that overtakes my brain, and then like sort of shuts out all other rational thought. So
That's scary.
yeah, totally, it's really bad. So again, you know, I don't know. Maybe if you like wired me up, you'd actually be like, no, you don't really have that. You're just making that up. But this is sort of what I've been working through. And so you know, back in the day, my version of this would be, and so this is not a holy shit day. I'll give you worse. But like there was one day where our second sales rep that we'd ever hired, or maybe our first sales rep we'd ever hired, once we only had like 10 sales reps, quit the company. And I was like literally, like I was like getting existential. Like, what is the point of capitalism? like because this one sales rep quit, and I was wandering our building because it was like how are we ever going to survive? This is the breadwinner of the business. Like we are not going to make it. And it like took me a day to recover from that. And then you know we would have massive existential threats of a competitor launching a product that looked exactly like what we did, obviously much bigger competitor, and it would be you know a complete existential nightmare of like holy shit, how are we going to survive? You know what's the point? And so you know for one, what I can tell you. You know, hopefully, maybe I'll accelerate some of your worries. Accelerate some of your not worry. Yeah, make you worry faster and more. Accelerate past some of those worries is what I can tell you is as someone who's been through about 1,000 holy shit moments is most of the time you just work through them. And so now when I have that equivalent, I'm able to step back, remember the times where I got through that holy shit moment and it wasn't a catastrophe, and sort of look over whatever that feeling is that I'm having right then and get way more rational about it. And that's sort of like separating the irrational, emotional, you know, feelings and issues from more of like, okay, let's write this out on paper. What is actually going on? Okay, one person quit. We'll be able to hire a different person. It'll be okay. This doesn't signal sort of some unending, you know, change to our business model or whatever. So that's the first thing. Second thing that's really helped is over the years, we've just been able to build a longer-term perspective for what we're trying to do. And that really helps because then that can put things in perspective. So if you have a 3 or 5 or 10 year vision for what you're building, today's sort of issues end up looking it can look pretty small by comparison of what you're really trying to accomplish. So if our goal, I'm going to make something up, is to get to $2 billion in revenue in some amount of time in the next N years, then one customer, we're losing one customer right now. I can sort of zoom back and say, okay, that's really painful. We need to diagnose it. We have to postmortem it. Let's get rational about how we're not going to let that happen again. But in the long-term perspective, hopefully this is a small blip, and I don't have to get emotional about this and super stressed out. And so that's the way I've thought about it is super long-term orientation. And then again we deal with this all the time. So I've given you examples of like small things that you hopefully are thinking are not actually catastrophes, but again internally I felt were. But then you have other things like our stock has probably 3 or 4 times dropped like 15 to 20% on a single day. And we just happen to be in a very volatile market, and so you just step back and you say, okay, again, trying to build a really long-term business. All other companies that have built really long-term businesses have also had this happen. There's no company that has ever built a $100 billion company or $1 trillion company that has not seen a 20 or 30% drop in a single day in their stock. So if they've gone through that, then like who are we to not be able to withstand that type of issue? And so you step back and you realize that other people have been through that. We can get through it. Try and communicate again a long-term North Star message, but also recognize that people are going to be we're going to be impacted by this. So show that there's some empathy, but then recognize that we have to be focused on the long term. So that's at least what I've kind of done.
And having a therapist.
Having a therapist helps.
Yeah, exactly. Other questions?
Yes, here we go. Thanks. Aaron, most venture-backed founders don't end up making any money for their equity. You obviously ended up on the winning side of that equation, but at the cost of raising a ton of money, the famous cash incineration machine that you were just talking about, and a lot of dilution. Based on your experience, how do you help other founders guide that? And would you have made any different decisions yourself, knowing what you know today?
Great question. And I just want to clarify, in case there are shareholders in the room, I actually haven't sold any stock publicly. So knock on wood, hopefully they'll have money at some point. But I appreciate the conviction on your end on my behalf. So I would say that this one's really tough. There was a funny Quora post I remember when we were initially going public, and this person wrote, does Aaron feel like really bad about putting all his blood, sweat, and tears into his company and only owning 4% of the company at the very end? And this was right when we were going public and all the ownership was listed. And you can I wrote a response, so you can kind of see the response. But the reality is I've generally cared way more about building the largest possible company, and not necessarily. And I should complete caveat. I've had no financial sort of obligations in my life, really, kind of ever. So I don't have all of this works because when we started Box, we were 19 and 20. We dropped out of college, which meant there was no more college payments. We had no kids. We had no families. So it was really easy. So again, this is easy for me to say. This does not apply to everybody. But we've always been very focused on how do we build the largest possible business, and hopefully we'll get a reasonable amount of that at the very end, and hopefully that'll be worth something interesting. But the business and scaling the business is the most important. Now, we probably took that to the extreme because I don't know that we were as thoughtful early on in our early rounds of funding about ownership and what the long-term compounding impact of that would be. I think we were, and part of this, I don't think we had much leverage from a negotiation standpoint. We were generally always in survival mode, maybe up until our series E. So when you're in survival mode and you're A and you're B and you're C, you don't really get to be like, no, if we sell more than 10% of the company, we're going to walk. Because they'll be like, well, you can walk, and then you'll be out of business. And you'll be like, okay, I'll sell you 30%. So fortunately, we're in a little bit more of a founder, startup-friendly market dynamic in terms of that negotiation leverage. But I'll give you a war story on this one. Our first round of funding, which was a couple angel investors, pre-Mark Cuban, we sold a quarter of the company for $80,000.
Oh, wow.
Second round of funding, we sold a quarter of the company for about $300,000. Third round of funding, we sold another quarter of the company for about $1.5 million. At some point, you're going to wonder how there's any
how many quarters there are in Box?
Ownership left. What's that?
How many quarters there are?
This defies all math. How we kept finding more quarters. So now we got lucky because our first two rounds of investors we were able to buy back. And so that's how the math actually ends up working out. But that was very unlikely, and you should never count on that. So if you had added up all of the rounds of funding, I think it would be like we've sold 300% of the company. So I don't know how. Maybe Brett knows how the math actually worked. But so exactly. So I would say one, obviously, to the extent that you have that leverage. you do want to focus on making sure that the team is protected, you are protected, you have enough stock for employees. That's really critical. But you also want to be thoughtful of the fact that there are plenty of people that will give you unlimited money at unlimited equity, and they may not be the right investors that you want to work with. And so there's always that sort of balance of how do you find an investor that is going to be strategic, that you want to work with, and you might end up giving up a premium on the equity side to be able to bring those types of investors on board. And it's always a trade-off. And hopefully, I wish you and anybody else as much leverage as possible in those negotiations. And I just, at least personally, I have not needed to fixate as much on the specific percentage ownership. Sometimes I wish I had, but overall, we're going for trying to build a company for the long term, and hopefully we'll get our fair share in the process.
I'll take the last one. We have 5 minutes left.
Oh, cool.
It's okay, sure. I have actually 2 questions. My first one, I'm sitting here for the past hour. I'm listening to you're funny, you're intelligent, you're authentic, you're genuine. I want to leave everything I do and come work for you. Is this?
Thank you.
How important is this in like being a good CEO and being successful? And my second question, other than Oudi's good look and charms, what made you come today?
Yeah. I have to be honest, it was mostly his good looks and charms. But I mean, I certainly appreciate what certainly this organization is doing and what the community is doing. So, it's always important to. I've certainly benefited a tremendous amount from advice over the years from entrepreneurs, and so to the extent that I have any useful stories to share, obviously want to make sure that we're sharing those, and then on the first piece, I think that every leader is going to be unique in their own right, and I think it's just important to find your own sort of leadership style. I remember early on being a little bit. I mean, again, partly because we were 22, 23 at the time, being a little bit self-conscious of like. What do you have to do to be a CEO? Because all of the other CEOs that had built enterprise software companies looked pretty different than me. I mean, again, partly because of just like they had more experience, they had been in other companies, they had worked at Oracle, they had seen how to build an enterprise software company, and I had none of that experience, and so I didn't exactly know like what are all the rules of like all the skills that you have to have as a CEO. And largely, and I don't want to oversimplify it, but largely, I think it's just come down to building a great team, fundamentally. Like my job is to build a team, a leadership team first and foremost, that they can then build their leadership team that can then build their organizations out. And that's the first sort of probably metric of success is can we keep an engaged, healthy team at the leadership level that can help us build a business. I think it's my job to make sure that we have a very clear strategy and are working against that and executing well against that over the long run. And then, of course, trying to build a culture and again, a set of values and principles that we can all kind of collectively live by. I think every other part of the CEO job is actually just totally dependent on who the CEO is. So for me, I spend time on product because I'm a product-oriented kind of CEO.
If I can just interject here, all he's been doing in the last few days is be on panels.
Yeah,
That's what I asked
and now I'm a panel CEO because we're trying to sell more software. So, and I'm at a panel tomorrow if you happen to be at the summit that I'm at. So I think this idea of sort of what is that my time? Okay. So I think everybody sort of has to find like what is their forte. I think I don't know if it's my forte, but it's the thing that I really like is product and design, and that's where I spend my discretionary time. And then as long as I'm doing the other kind of core jobs of long-term strategy, building a healthy team, making sure we're building a culture that can kind of go execute, then I think that that's what the CEO has to do. But some CEOs lean more into sales, some lean more into customers, some lean more into customer service, some lean more into just pure financials, some are quiet, some are loud. I think it really doesn't matter on any of those dimensions as long as, again, you're kind of doing the core. Now, that has to be time. Okay, that is a conspicuous signal.
I think the next step is people are just starting to walk outside.
Okay.
We're going to sit here and they're going to walk.
Sometimes you'll just have a person subtly just sit right there and show a little
siren.
card. But now you guys have horns and lighting. I get the point. It's Purim over here. Okay, we're good. Okay. Okay, cool.
Okay. So on behalf of everybody here, thank you so much, Aaron. It's a pleasure to have you. You're an awesome guy.